Hooves thundered before she saw them, dust rising like smoke from a burned prayer. A steer bawled, boards popped, and Emmeline, M, flinched by the pump, the bucket handle slick in her damp grip. She didn't breathe right until a broad shadow cut the glare and turned it gentle. "Easy," Calderhart said, voice quiet as rain on tin. He slid from the bay, tied off, and eased the pump. Water came. "You're safe right there." She nodded but didn't lift her eyes. 3 days on his ranch, 4 words spoken. "Yes, thank you. Good night." Calder didn't press. He let the dipper cool her palms and talked about cattle the way men soothe skittish colts. Slow, factual, never cornering. "First rush is always loud," he said. "Then it's just breathing." The house smelled of pine and soap. The preacher had called them husband and wife 2 weeks earlier. Calder slept the first night in a chair and tucked the blanket under her feet like a letter folded clean. He stood aside when she passed, making a gate in himself. Dusk brought rain. Lightning ribbed the room white. M saw other walls, a hand at her wrist, a mouth saying, "Hush," like a threat. A match scraped. Calder set a lamp low, honey light in a soft circle, and left it. Her breath matched it. Sleep came. Morning was sharp. His note on the table, "North fence, back by dinner. If you want, onions in garden. If you want, choice." She wiped the window and looked at onion tops like green quills. Then a peddler's cart came slow, blue cloth thrown back to show ribbons and muslin. The man walked like he trusted ground to hold, hat brim low, eyes that missed little. "Morning to the lady of the house," he called. "Pretty things for a new wife, mirrors, ribbons, a calm heart if I've got one left." M stepped back without choosing to. He tipped his hat to the porch. "I'll leave a charm. Keeps bad dreams from sticking." Metal touched the sill. Wheels creaked away. She moved a chair against the door before she looked. On the sill lay a small silver oval, a painted blue eye in the middle, too bright, watching. At sundown, Calder read her face before he saw the chair. "Tell me," he said, stopping short like a man who knows sudden movements spook cattle. "Man," she managed. "Peddler, I," she pointed. Calder turned the charm in his palm. "Pretty," he said, "not the kind we keep." He stepped outside and snapped his wrist. The eye flashed and vanished in grass. "Eat," he said when he came back. "Then if you want, I'll sit a while." They ate soup and bread. He talked posts and calves and didn't dig where fear lay. After dishes, he checked the latch twice without ceremony. She slept with the lamp low and woke once to coyote talk. 2 mornings later, the charm waited by the milk pail like a coin asking to be picked up. Her skin tightened. She wrapped it in a rag and hid it on a shed shelf where old nails rusted. Days found a rhythm. Calder invented errands through the kitchen, rinsing a cup twice, leaving an apple, setting a tiny horseshoe on the sill for luck. "We'll get there," he said, looking at the long horizon. M tried 1 new word a day, like a child tasting a berry. Skillet, knuckle, sparrow, grateful. She hummed while kneading and left the door unlatched an hour without counting. The stray dog, with 1 ear, came nights to check if the world had improved. It took bacon from the ground, then from her palm, eyes on hers, as if teaching how trust is fed. On a hard blue Wednesday, heat trembled the road, and a rider's shape cut it. M knew the hat before the face. The peddler lifted a hand as if they were already friends. Calder stood in the yard, oiling a bit. M set her pan of peas down. The peas rolled like soft marbles. "Afternoon," the man called. "Does this ranch purchase news? I've got a story about a lady who ran from a promise and owes a man money and more. The man owns a black horse and a worse temper." His glance slid to M and back. Calder set the rag down. "You're on Heartland," he said. "State your business and be brief." "Kin hired me to find a woman," the peddler said. "Pretty, small voice. Belongs to a man by law, papers, and preacher both. I'd wager she's in your shade." Breath left him. The floor in her mind dropped to the cellar, where fear slept with its boots on. Calder didn't glance at her. "A helpful man would go to the sheriff," he said. "A stirrer comes to a ranch and makes noise for coin. Which are you?" "I go where the silver sits," the man said. "The sheriff waits for trouble to walk to him. I deliver." "Delivery accepted," Calder said. Take the rest away. The peddler's eyes slid toward the shed. You'll hear more, he said like weather. From a man with a black horse. Paper speaks loud, I'm only the whisper. He turned his pony and left. Calder watched the road until it was only light again. Then he crouched by Em. Can I touch you? She nodded. His hand closed warm around hers. We'll go to town, he said. We'll stand together in the sheriff's door and let the law show its face. If it's straight, good. If not, we won't leave you in its keeping. She looked at his throat, because eyes felt like cliffs. He wasn't my husband. The ground tilted. My father traded me when the store failed, gave me like a mule. Papers weren't ours. I ran because the other thing was not living. His hand tightened, then eased. Then the paper's a lie, he said. We'll say so. There is more, she said, voice finding its narrow. The man with the black horse is kin to the peddler. He keeps people like jarred peaches. All right, Calder said. He won't step over this threshold. He will try, she whispered. Then we'll be ready without getting loud. That night, he cleaned the rifle like a gift and set a chair by the door in a place you could see the yard and not be seen. He had her stand in the doorway and count to 20 while looking at the road. At 30, she let her shoulder rest, brief as a sigh, against his arm. At first light, they rode. The sheriff read the paper, snorted at the dead man's signature and said, Nonsense. If a man comes with a claim, I'll ask how a corpse signed. If trouble rides your way, send smoke. They walked into noon. A drunk slept under an awning. A woman with a basket smiled and meant it. Something tight in Em's chest loosened. On the ride home, Calder talked fence and water. Silence travelled easy between them, like shade. A week of small good days followed. Burned biscuits fixed without tears. The promised swing sketched on a board. The dog deciding to like the porch. On the 8th day, 5 riders cut the heat. First came the black horse. The peddler smiled like Trouble's cousin. Calder stepped to the yard, and Em gripped the jam until her knuckles made white moons. I've come for what's mine, the black horseman said, paper flashing trout silver. You've come wrong, Calder answered. This house doesn't hold what you're looking for. Oh, it does, the man said easily. She's there like a moth. Come out, wife. I am not your wife, Em said, clear and not small. The dog growled. A hawk wrote unreadable in the sky. The man waved the paper, signed, witnessed. Sheriff'll side with me if he likes his job. Leather creaked. Sweat and whiskey breathed from the road. The peddler called, Best keep it quiet, friend. Calder lifted his hand, a small stop. Em tasted dust. Bring her, the black horseman said to the peddler. Make it quiet. The peddler gathered reins. Before the first hoof fell in their yard, a star flashed at the cottonwoods, and the sheriff's horses slid from the shade like the trees had been saving them there. Trouble didn't leave under its own steam. The law had to nudge it. The sheriff's mare stopped between Calder and the black horse, calm enough to shame skittish hearts. 2 deputies flanked him, and a third, woman with a small scar on her chin, rested a hand on her carbine like it was a sleeping cat. Paper's talkative, the sheriff said mildly. Figure I'd read along. He tipped his hat to Em. Ma'am, the black horseman, Warren Clegg, held the document like a badge. I've come to collect my wife. Signed and witnessed. Names, the sheriff said. Warren Clegg. Her father promised her when he took my credit. The sheriff looked to Em. You claim a name? Emmeline Harper, she said, finding breath arranged in the right order. Given without consent. Paper forged. She handed the bill of sale that had lived under her mattress. He took both, turned them, watched ink glisten. This witness here, he said, tapping Warren's page. J.P. Archer shot his thumb off Easter last year, then died of pride 2 days later. This date is last month. He lifted his eyes. Dead men sign slow. He passed the page to the scarred deputy. Put this where it won't trouble decent paper. Warren's mouth thinned. You saying a man can't claim what's his? I'm saying a man can't claim a person, the sheriff replied, making person heavy enough to land. And he can't claim her with a corpse's hand. He let the chair in his mind fall forward. If you wish to press charges for forgery or harassment, miss, I'll hear you. Warren measured men, rifles, sky. "This ain't over," he said, but it sounded like weather, not a promise. They rode off. Dust wrote their names briefly in the air and let them go. Law stayed for water and a biscuit that did not embarrass M by burning. The woman deputy scratched the dog with one ear until he decided to like the badge. The sheriff drank and said to Calder, "You keep the door shut. We'll keep the road clean as we can." And to M, "You keep breathing. That's everybody's job and most forget it." When they left, the day felt larger. M's legs trembled late. Calder didn't rush to hold her, just stood nearby until she stepped the last small distance herself and pressed her forehead to his shirt like a weary pilgrim finding a good wall. He smelled of sun and leather and something like wheat. "I thought I'd be small forever," she said. "This house makes people the size they are," he answered. They talked plans that felt like furniture arrangement more than war. He moved the chair closer to the door. He hung the shotgun where she could reach it without climbing. He sifted a thin line of flour across the back step. "Shoes show off, even when their owners mean to sneak," he said. Nights came quiet. Not everyone stayed that way. Near midnight, a board whispered. The dog rumbled a warning from a deeper place than law. Calder lifted the rifle. M touched his forearm. "I'm here." He nodded once and set the lamp low on the floor to blind outside eyes. He went to the front, loudly enough to lure. She slipped to the side door and tucked herself behind it, the short old shotgun steady in her hands. The latch sighed. A boot eased in, bringing the smell of whiskey and rancid grease. Time pulled thin. "Stop," M said, iron in the small word. The boot froze. The voice surprised him. She touched the barrel to the meat of a thigh. "One more breath toward this room, and you'll be wishing for new bones." A laugh broke in the middle. "She bites," the man hissed to someone behind him. Calder's voice carried from the parlor. "I do too." Then a scuffle, a gasp, ribs receiving instruction. M held steady the way you hold a baby's head. The boot withdrew. She nudged the barrel along to help it choose the right future. "Take your charm," she said, "and take your eyes. We don't hang them here." The men ran. Not gracefully. The yard made sure of that. The flour showed two sets of prints because flour tells the truth even when men don't. They did not sleep much after. Calder unlaced her boots with careful fingers and pressed his forehead to her knuckles, like a man thank-youing water. "Good," he said. "What you did." The words were not a medal pinned on her. They were a mirror showing her own shape back to her. Dawn brought eggs that didn't stick and coffee that didn't bite. M found she could breathe through the memory without choking. She stood on the porch and watched the road and did not count to 20. She just watched until watching felt ordinary. Days knitted. He built the promised swing. She planted seeds with steady fingers. They read the paper sometimes and tossed it when it lied. They took in a girl from town for a month when her father drank himself thin. M taught her where the flower lived and where the shotgun did, how to string beans and how to see rain far off. Calder taught her to find north by the handle of a dipper in the sky. The girl stopped shaking by the third week. She left with a loaf and a ribbon and the idea that a house can tell the truth and still be gentle. One night in late spring, M woke to a different quiet. Not the kind with peace under it, the kind with waiting. She heard a horse blow, soft, trying to decide if it liked its own plan. She slid from bed. Calder was already standing, the rifle resting easy in his hands like it had always liked him. They waited that quiet out. It passed by like a cloud that had already dropped its rain someplace else. In the morning, tracks showed near the cottonwoods, coming close, changing their minds. "He's not done," Calder said, "but he's learning." She looked at him in full for the first time since the preacher said wife. "So am I," she answered, and took his hand. The days that followed were soft enough to notice. She burned her thumb on a biscuit and swore, and didn't apologize. He laughed in relief. She told him a story about a sparrow she had freed from twine, and he told her one about a heifer that had to be coaxed backward out of a ravine by singing. She began to want what came next. "What do you want?" he asked one evening, not as a test, but like a man opening a door and standing aside. She tested the size of the answer. I want to be your wife, because I choose it. She startled at the sound of the words. They were large and bore her weight. He closed his eyes just once. When he opened them, the shine there made her chest warm. Then we will do it right, he said, under a good sky, with witnesses that aren't liars. They married on a Wednesday because that's when the preacher had an hour, and because Wednesdays are good for laying new things down straight. The church smelled of lemon oil and dust and someone's old hymn. She wore a blue ribbon that had once been meant as bait, and now was banner. The dog with one ear waited on the steps and considered himself official. They walked home slow, as if greeting every fence post. She held his arm without flinching. The swing creaked like a loyal ship. The river below went on being itself, lazy, sure. The world breathed like it had been holding that breath for them. By harvest, the road stayed quiet longer at a time. The sheriff came by sometimes to lean on his saddle horn and talk about nothing, which is how men mention everything. Once he said, "If Clegg shows his face again, I'll set him to digging ditch until he remembers where he put his soul." Em thanked him without words. He understood. On a night when the air tasted of cut hay and stars, she set her palm on her own belly and felt steadiness there. Not a child, maybe. Some stories take that path and some don't. But a life, hers. "I used to think love was a thing taken," she told Calder. "Now I think it's a place." "This is it," he said. The words a house she could walk into and stay. They chose how to live, and then they defended that choice the way you defend a doorway, with hands, with patience, with a promise spoken plain. The choice showed itself one last time as dust on the road. Late summer. Heat held its breath. A single rider, Warren Clegg, came back without his small army, pride doing the work of numbers. He dismounted like a man expecting his foot to land on another person's neck. Calder stood in the yard with the evenness he wore for everything. Em sat on the porch, the dog with one ear under her chair, like a shadow with opinions. "Afternoon," Warren said, tipping his hat to the wrong queen. "My claim stands whether the sheriff reads or not. I'll take what's mine without a scene." "There's already a scene," Calder said mildly. "You're in it." Warren's smile was brand new and already chipped. "You think a quiet man scares me?" He set a palm on the porch swing chain, and it hummed like a warning line. Em spoke before fear could rewind her mouth. "Walk away," she said. "Do it now, and do it without leaving pieces we have to sweep." "Girl," he said sour, "you learned to talk in the wrong house." "No," she said, "I learned to talk in the right one." His hand went for a gun that looked more like jewelry than tool. Calder moved so little you'd miss it if you hadn't watched him for months. Half-step, pivot, rifle coming up and stopping exactly where a man realizes he is now an idea inside other people's choices. The dog laid a growl like a taut thread through air. No sheriff this time. Some endings belong to the people who held the beginnings. The yard held its breath. A hawk wrote a short word above them. Em imagined it spelled enough. Calder's voice didn't rise. "You'll lose this and everything after if you aim that at my house." Warren looked from the rifle's mouth to Em, hunting the old smallness. It wasn't there. He found a woman whose voice had learned its own weather. He found a porch that had become a fort without declaring itself one. He found he was the only person present who didn't belong. He laughed once, hard and lonely. "You think you built something worth keeping?" "We did," Em said, "and it keeps us back. Pride decides longer than wisdom." He drew. The shot came, short, clean. Calder's shoulder kicked. Warren's hat leapt. He stumbled into light and sat hard when the chair was pulled by air. Blood striped his forearm where the bullet grazed. 6 thoughts ran across his face before the 7th one. "Leave." "This is my last step on your dirt," he said, trying to make it prophecy. "You won't see me again." "Good," Em answered. The word fit her mouth at last. He mounted, small now against a very large day, and dwindled into dust. Calder lowered the rifle and hissed a breath between his teeth. "Shoulder," Em said, already moving. The burn stripe would flower purple by evening. She cleaned, wrapped, tied, hands steady. He watched her like a fence going true. "It's a mark I don't mind," he said. "Me either." They went inside. The house sighed as boards do when weather changes and promises are kept. The kettle lifted its small voice. The lamp gentled dark corners. The chair returned to its duty by the door. They sat quiet and felt a weight lift neither had named. The rest was living. They built small things and let time build the large. The porch swing earned its song. Onions fattened. Rain came when it needed to and sometimes when it didn't. They added a room nobody called a nursery, but that held quilts, books, and 2 mugs for visiting children. Em taught 3 girls and a boy from town how to make biscuits and shoot straight and read the sky's bruises. Calder taught straps and snakes and how to hear the difference between wind and warning. In winter, the stove ticked hours. Em learned which silence was contentment and which meant a story wanted telling. She tried words on nights when fear used to pace. "When I was small," she began once and told the rest. He put down the whittling and held her hand like it was a tool that could build something. It did. It built sleep. Spring kicked the door with green boots. She planted with the same hands that had once only hidden. Sometimes the hawk left a feather by the fence post like a note. The dog limped one morning and healed by Sunday without complaint. The river said low things, and sometimes they answered and laughed at how married to the place they'd become. Summer warmed the boards and sweetened the air with cut hay. They shared peaches on the step. She told a joke badly and he laughed anyway. He sang to a heifer. The heifer approved. Autumn put gold in the cottonwoods. They stacked wood and promises. The sheriff rode by, tipped his hat, and left them the quiet he knew they wanted. Warren did not return. The road forgot his name. They made ceremonies of small victories, a loaf that rose proud, a calf that lived, a hinge that stopped squeaking, a night without waking. They hung a bell by the door and made a rule. Ring it when you come home, even if you've only been to the woodpile. The round, honest sound taught the house its heart. On long evenings they swung under leaves turned silver on one side and black on the other, coins turning slow. She rested her head to his shoulder and felt his breath travel the same road hers did. "Tell me the story again," she'd say. "Which one?" "The one where you didn't push and I learned to step." He told it from thunder and dust to dipper and lamp to a porch that didn't quit being gentle. The middle changed a little. The beginning and end stayed right. One harvest dusk, wind smelling of wheat and far thunder. She pressed his hand in both of hers. "I want to live as your wife," she said, smiling at the truth she chose daily. "Every day there is. You do," he said. "And I want to live as your husband." He kissed her slow and sure, like opening a gate and walking through. Winter came again, and the roof learned a deeper song. They hung dried oranges and pinned sprigs of sage above the door. She stitched a blue quilt from scraps of old shirts and ribbon, and they slept under it like sky. He built a crib-shaped toolbox for the boy from town who loved hammers. People began to come by with pies and small troubles. They always left lighter. In the first spring rain after, they stood barefoot on the porch boards and let the drops salt their faces. She laughed, full, head back, and water ran off her like a new start. He took her hand and spun her slowly, the swing creaking time for them. "Home," he said. She answered without words, and meant forever. Together they watched the river drift under dusk, the swing creaking the smallest yes in the world. Stars tapped into the dark like nails driven by a patient hand. The land around them agreed. If this story sat quiet in you and warmed like a stove on a cold morning, if you felt courage take your hand, if you saw how gentleness holds, come back for more. Subscribe for more frontier romances and quiet braveries, for nights where fear loses and home wins, for love that sets its own law and keeps it.